What if I told you that the person who hurt you the most remembers every single detail of what they did to you? Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But here's what Jung didn't tell you in that famous quote, and what I'm about to reveal will shatter every assumption you've made about people who refuse to acknowledge their wrongdoing. By the end of this, you'll understand why some people can sleep peacefully at night while you're still awake, replaying every word, every moment, every look of pain that crossed your face when they betrayed you. Let me start with a truth that will make your blood run cold. They remember everything. That person who shattered your trust, who left you questioning your own reality, who made you feel like you were losing your mind, they remember every single detail. Every word they said, every promise they broke, every moment they watched you crumble under the weight of their betrayal. According to Carl Jung's revolutionary theory of the shadow self, we all carry within us the parts of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge. Jung discovered through decades of clinical work that the more we try to suppress these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, the more power they gain over us. But here's where it gets sinister. The people who hurt you aren't suffering from memory loss. They're suffering from something far more calculated, what Jung called shadow projection, the unconscious act of denying their own darkness by making you carry it instead. But wait, there's something even more disturbing about this pattern. And if you've ever wondered why some people can destroy your peace and then go about their day like nothing happened, what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about human nature. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when one person refuses to be transformed? What happens when they choose comfort over consciousness, denial over development? They don't just forget, they actively choose to forget, because remembering would require something most people aren't psychologically prepared for: genuine accountability and accountability, as Jung discovered through his groundbreaking work with patients, demands the most terrifying thing of all: authentic change. Jung wrote in his personal letters, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. These people who hurt you, they've built their entire identity around never having to face that terror. They've constructed elaborate psychological defenses to avoid the very thing that would set them free. You know what these people are addicted to instead? Comfort, ego protection, denial wrapped in a pretty bow of 'I don't remember it that way' or 'you're being too sensitive.'" Carl Jung discovered through decades of psychological research that the human psyche will go to extraordinary lengths to protect its self-image. He called this protective mechanism the persona, the mask we wear to hide our true nature, not just from others, but from ourselves. According to Jung's clinical observations, when someone hurts you and then acts like it never happened, they're not just lying to you. They're maintaining what he called the provisional life, a psychological state where someone avoids the deeper work of becoming who they truly are by staying perpetually comfortable, perpetually justified, perpetually innocent. And here's where it gets really twisted. And this is something that will make you question every interaction you've ever had with someone who refuses to acknowledge their wrongdoing. Jung said, "What you resist persists." But he also discovered something even more disturbing. Some people have mastered the art of making their resistance look like your problem. When someone hurts you and then acts like nothing happened, they're not just protecting themselves. They're actively destabilizing you. They're making you question your memory, your reaction, your entire emotional reality. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I'm being too dramatic. Stop right there. According to Jung's extensive work on psychological manipulation, this is exactly what happens when someone's shadow self encounters accountability. They don't respond with remorse. They respond with deflection. They don't take responsibility, they transfer it. They don't heal the wound. They make you question if you're even bleeding. Jung called this phenomenon psychological projection, but it goes deeper than that. It's what modern psychology recognizes as a form of gaslighting, making you doubt your own perception of reality to protect their perception of themselves. Carl Jung discovered something profound about human behavior. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But some people have discovered something even more powerful. The privilege of never having to become anything at all by mastering the art of strategic silence. Their silence isn't accidental. It's not passive. It's not even really silence. It's a weapon. And what I'm about to tell you about this weapon will explain why you felt so crazy, so confused, so desperate for closure that never comes, and why they seem to get stronger every time you get weaker. When someone hurts you and then disappears into silence, that silence isn't emptiness, it's power. Jung wrote extensively about power dynamics in relationships, and he understood something crucial that most people miss. Silence shifts the burden of confusion onto the person who's already hurting. Think about it. When they say nothing, you start saying everything, replaying conversations in your head, over-explaining your feelings, questioning your own reactions, hoping for a response that's never coming, analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment of contact, looking for signs of remorse that simply aren't there. That's not an accident. That's the entire strategy. Carl Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens? But these people, they've built their entire identity on looking outside, on projecting their shadow onto you, on making you carry the weight of their end-process guilt while they walk away unscathed. According to Jung's research into what he called unconscious competence, some people become masterful at emotional manipulation without ever consciously choosing to do so. They develop an intuitive understanding of how to push the burden of emotional labor onto others, while protecting themselves from any consequences. But here's what will shock you most about people who use silence as a weapon, and this insight from Jung's most controversial work will reveal the true psychology behind their behavior. Jung discovered that silence, when used strategically, creates what he called psychological dependency. The more someone withholds the response you need, the more desperate you become for any kind of acknowledgement. And that desperation, it serves their needs perfectly. It puts you in the position of chasing, of softening your boundaries, of backing down from your truth just to get any kind of response. It makes you grateful for scraps of attention from the very person who should be begging for your forgiveness. Jung wrote, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." But people who weaponize silence have discovered something even more powerful. They can make you fear entering your own cave of self-worth by keeping you focused on their empty cave of non-response. According to Carl Jung's groundbreaking work on a collective unconscious, we all share certain archetypal patterns. One of the most destructive is what Jung identified as the innocent archetype, the part of the psyche that refuses to acknowledge its capacity for harm. But Jung also discovered something that will disturb you. Some people don't just access this archetype occasionally, they live there permanently. They've made innocence their entire identity, which means they can never ever be wrong. And here's what will shock you about people who can't apologize. This insight from Jung's personal analysis of his most difficult patients will change everything you thought you knew about accountability. Jung discovered that people who consistently avoid taking responsibility have developed what he called unconscious competence in emotional manipulation. They're not just randomly hurting people and then forgetting about it. They've unconsciously mastered the art of hurting others while protecting themselves from any consequences. According to Jung's clinical notes, these individuals operate from what he called psychological inflation, a state where the ego becomes so enlarged that it can't tolerate any information that contradicts its self-image. When you ask for accountability from someone in this state, you're not just asking for an apology, you're asking them to deflate their entire sense of self, and that's exactly why they can't do it. When conflict arises, when emotions surface, when accountability is required, watch what happens. They vanish, they go silent, they change the subject, they post something happy on social media. They surround themselves with people who validate their version of events. This isn't overwhelm, it's pattern. It's not confusion, it's strategy. Carl Jung said, "Alter you make unconscious conscious. It will direct your life and you will call it fate." These people haven't made their destructive patterns conscious. Instead, they've made them systematic, predictable, and devastatingly effective. But wait, there's something even more sinister about how these people operate. And Jung's research into what he called complex psychology reveals the disturbing truth about how they manage to sleep at night. Jung spent years studying what he called psychological complexes, autonomous clusters of thoughts, feelings, and memories that operate independently of conscious control. But what Jung discovered goes deeper than simple compartmentalization. According to Jung's clinical observations, people who consistently avoid accountability don't just have complexes. They've developed what he called dissociative competence. They can literally separate their actions from their identity so completely that they genuinely believe they're not responsible for the harm they cause. It's not that they don't remember hurting you, it's that they've convinced themselves they had no choice, that you forced their hand, that they were the real victim all along. They've developed such sophisticated psychological defenses that they can rewrite history in real time, casting themselves as the hero in every story where they were actually the villain. Jung wrote, "The most dangerous thing is to live in a world of projections." These people don't just live in a world of projections. They've created an entire reality where they're always right, always justified, always misunderstood. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But emotional maturity, true emotional maturity, requires something most people aren't willing to give: the courage to face their own capacity for harm. And that's exactly why you keep getting hurt by people who can't process guilt. Here's something that will blow your mind about why some people can never genuinely apologize. And Jung's research into what he called shadow integration reveals the disturbing truth about this pattern. Jung discovered that guilt, when processed healthfully, is actually a guide. It's the part of our psyche that says, something I did hurt someone I care about and I need to make it right. It's what he called the moral function of the unconscious, the part of us that seeks balance, justice, and repair. But people who lack emotional maturity don't see guilt as guidance. They see it as an attack. They experience it as a threat to their very existence. According to Jung's work with patients who struggled with accountability, these individuals have never learned to separate their behavior from their identity. In their psychological framework, admitting wrongdoing doesn't just mean they made a mistake. It means they are a mistake. That internal collapse is too threatening to their fragile sense of self. So instead of facing the discomfort of growth, they make you the problem. Instead of sitting with their own shadow, they project it onto you. Instead of doing the work of integration, they choose the comfort of denial. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." These people have chosen the opposite path. They've chosen to keep their darkness unconscious by making you carry it instead. And here's what Jung realized about people who consistently avoid their shadow work. This insight will explain why confronting someone gently about their behavior often leads to you feeling like you're in a war you didn't start. Jung identified what he called ego defense mechanisms, psychological strategies the mind uses to protect itself from threatening information. But he also discovered that some people have turned these defenses into a lifestyle. When you ask for accountability from someone who's built their entire identity around avoiding responsibility, you're not just asking for an apology. You're asking them to dismantle their entire psychological structure. According to Jung's clinical notes, people in this state don't hear your pain as information. They hear it as an attack. Your request for understanding becomes their call to battle. Your vulnerability becomes their weakness to exploit. Your truth becomes their enemy to defeat. Carl Jung discovered that these individuals have spent so much energy building walls around their ego that they've forgotten how to access their own empathy. They can't sit with your pain because they've never learned to sit with their own. They've developed what Jung called psychological rigidity, an inability to adapt, to grow, to change in response to new information. They're stuck in what he called the provisional life, always avoiding the deeper work of becoming who they truly are. But here's the most important thing Jung discovered about emotional development, and this insight will finally explain why you keep expecting depth from people who only operate on the surface. Jung understood that not everyone is operating at the same level of emotional development. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. But what happens when one of those substances is emotionally inert?" According to Jung's developmental psychology, some people hit their emotional ceiling long before they ever reach honesty. They'll give you excuses. They'll give you silence. They'll give you distraction. But they won't give you what you actually need: genuine acknowledgement. The apology you never got isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their ceiling. Their emotional range maxed out long before it ever reached accountability. Jung discovered that real apologies require more than words. They require what he called psychological integration, the ability to hold both your light and your shadow, your good intentions and your harmful actions, your love and your capacity for damage. Not everyone has developed this integration. Some people are still operating from what Jung called psychological inflation, a state where the ego is so enlarged that it can't tolerate any information that challenges its self-image. Carl Jung discovered that psychological patterns repeat until they're made conscious. But what happens when someone is committed to keeping their patterns unconscious? What I'm about to reveal about these unconscious patterns will help you spot them before you get caught in their web. And Jung's final warning about this type of person will protect your peace forever. Jung identified what he called repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to repeat familiar patterns even when they're destructive. People who hurt others without remorse aren't just making random mistakes. They're following an unconscious blueprint that serves their psychological needs. According to Jung's research, these individuals will consistently choose environments that protect their delusions. They'll surround themselves with people who won't challenge them, friends who nod along, partners who don't push back. They create what Jung called psychological echo chambers that keep the mirror of self-reflection far away. Because once they start looking in that mirror, the whole illusion cracks. The illusion that they're harmless. The illusion that they were just doing their best. The illusion that everyone else is just too sensitive or too dramatic or too needy. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." These people have built their entire lives around avoiding that terror. They've developed what he called unconscious competence in emotional avoidance. They can hurt someone and then immediately create a psychological framework that absolves them of all responsibility. And here's the most liberating truth Jung ever discovered about difficult people. This insight will set you free from the cycle of waiting, hoping, and exhausting yourself trying to drag someone into emotional maturity. Jung realized something that will change your life. You cannot make unconscious people conscious. You cannot force someone to see what they're determined to ignore. You cannot love someone into emotional maturity if they're committed to staying emotionally immature. According to Jung's final writings on human relationships, the most radical act of self-love is accepting that some people will never give you what you need. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they don't have the psychological capacity to provide it. Their inability to apologize, to take responsibility, to acknowledge your pain. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's information about their developmental level. That's them showing you exactly who they are at their current stage of psychological evolution. Jung discovered that trying to extract accountability from someone who's emotionally unavailable is like trying to draw water from an empty well. The well isn't broken, it's just dry, and no amount of persistence, patience, or love will make water appear where none exists. Carl Jung spent his entire career teaching people to integrate their shadow, to become whole, to face themselves completely. But he also understood something crucial. This work is voluntary. No one can be forced into consciousness. And here's the final truth that will set you free from every person who's ever hurt you and acted like nothing happened. Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." The people who hurt you are still dreaming. They're still looking outside, still projecting their shadow, still avoiding the mirror of self-reflection. But you've been doing the work. You've been looking inside. You've been seeking truth, accountability, healing, growth. You've been awake in a relationship with someone who chose to stay asleep. According to Jung's most profound insight, your healing doesn't depend on their awakening. Your closure doesn't require their consciousness. Your peace doesn't need their permission. Your worth doesn't need their validation. The person who hurt you and acts like nothing happened, they know exactly what they're doing. They remember every detail. They're just not psychologically equipped to face the truth of their actions. And now you know exactly what you need to do. Stop waiting for them to evolve. Stop explaining your pain to people who profit from not understanding it. Stop carrying the emotional labor for relationships where you're the only one doing the work. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But he also discovered that the most liberating thing is to accept others completely, including accepting their limitations, their unconsciousness, their refusal to grow. When you stop trying to make unconscious people conscious, you free yourself to invest in relationships with people who are already awake. When you stop waiting for emotionally immature people to mature, you create space for emotionally intelligent people to enter your life. The goal isn't to make everyone conscious. It's to become conscious enough to protect your own peace from those who refuse to do their inner work. That's the real shadow work. That's the real integration. That's the real freedom. According to Carl Jung, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The people who hurt you without remorse have taught you something invaluable about your own strength, your own worth, your own capacity for healing. They've shown you what you won't tolerate. They've revealed what you truly value. They've proven that your peace is worth protecting, and that's the gift hidden in the wound. The understanding that you deserve people who can meet you at your level of emotional maturity, who can sit with discomfort, who can face their shadows, who can grow alongside you. The apology you never got was never about you. It was about them. It was about their ceiling, their limitations, their choice to stay unconscious. But your healing, your growth, your freedom, That's all about you, and that's exactly where your power lies. Jung said it best. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You know who you truly are. You're someone who faces truth, who seeks accountability, who believes in growth and healing and authentic connection. And that's exactly who you should be looking for in return. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it.